Let's fight with hope. Let's fight with confidence in ourselves and a commitment to each other.
This is our moment. This is our mission.
We are all now standing united behind Joe and my friend Kamala.
We all need to be in the fight to get Joe and Kamala elected.
So I'm asking you to believe in your own ability to make sure that the basic tenets of our democracy endure.
This is one of the most difficult moments America's ever faced.
We haven't given up. We just need leadership worthy of our nation.
I trust Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to guide us toward that better future.
We must come together, defeat Donald Trump, and elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
It is up to us to add our voices and our votes to the chorus of history.
Good evening, Florida. Thank you so much for joining us today for our 10 Weeks Till Election Day live stream. And today is an honor and a privilege to be joined by two very special guests. First, activist against gun violence, Fred Guttenberg, and Florida House Representative Joe Geller. Thank you so much for being here today.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you. And we're just going to jump right into it. As you know, this past week, viewers, if you don't know, both Representative Geller and Mr. Guttenberg were in the DNC. They were featured in the DNC. Mr. Guttenberg was during the roll call for Florida, and Representative Geller was actually seen in the audience once Joe Biden gave his speech. Yeah, we remember him applauding. But, you know, first of all, I think a lot of viewers are going to ask, you know, where was this filmed, you know, especially the roll call. Mr. Guttenberg, we'll go to you first. The roll call with the DNC chair of Florida. Could you tell us where it was filmed and what did it feel like to announce the roll call for Florida?
Well, yeah, and so there were actually two different things that I ended up doing. One was pre-recorded. I was in North Carolina at the time, and so that's where I did it. And it was the segment you saw that opened the convention with We the People. And then on Thursday night, where we did the This Time Next Year. So that was pre-recorded. The roll call was done on the New River in Fort Lauderdale. So here's the thing that people may not have realized. It was intended to be live. The night before, we were there doing all the dry runs, practicing. Everything was set up, and they recorded it just in case there's any kind of a glitch or an issue. The night of, we were there. We were ready to go. I think about 5 minutes before we were supposed to actually go on, Florida decided to be Florida, and it started to pour.
I remember that.
And I don't mean like rain a little bit. I mean pour. And now I'm standing there on this little podium thing. And I'm just getting drenched. They keep running up to me with a towel trying to wipe my head off. I'm like, forget it. It's Florida. As long as there's no lightning, I'll be fine. But then I guess some of the communications equipment started to react to the water. That said, we were continuing to wait for the signal to go when I started getting text messages from people saying, oh my God, that was great. So I guess in the control room, they decided for the purposes of better safe than sorry to run with the recorded segment from the night before.
Right.
Which nobody would have known. It looked the same. It was the same spot, the same lighting, but it didn't have rain.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I thought it was live personally, but I remember watching it that night. I was like, Fred's out there, and I'm looking out my window, and it's pouring. It's just pouring, and it felt like a tropical storm.
Well, I was out there, and I was getting rained on, but no, that wasn't what ended up getting shown.
Right. So actually, we'll play a quick clip. I don't know if we can have audio, but
and that's
yeah, we can see you there. That was the pre-recorded version, right?
Yeah, and that's Terry Rizzo behind me.
I'm assuming she was there too, getting drenched.
She was.
Yeah, so I mean, we saw it and it was amazing. I mean, I could tell you, my family, we were so happy to see you up there because we know that you're a champion, you know, for gun activism against gun violence right now, you know, and that's something that teenagers in this country hold very dear to their heart right now because it's an issue that's affecting all of us in our schools, and it gets personal, you know. But during a time where none of us are really in school, well, most of us aren't at school, we're actually home virtual, you know, we're not facing that fear constantly, but it's still something to think about, you know. It's not something that, oh, we're not in school anymore, this is no longer an issue. No, it is an issue and we need to fix it. And, you know, this should have been fixed after Sandy Hook. This should have been fixed after Parkland. This should have been fixed after so many, you know, mass shootings where we've lost so many people. And, you know, I just really quickly want to go into Representative Geller and ask you, you know, after Parkland, we know that the Florida Congress was trying to pass some sort of laws, trying to actually, I believe, ban bump stocks, which the Florida Congress did. But I believe that there were more things that personally could have been done. But, you know, I personally blame the Florida GOP because obviously they are bought out by the NRA, at least many of them are. So I just want to get your insight into how that was, you know, the fight against gun violence within the halls of the Florida Congress.
Well, let me say first that, you know, anytime I get the opportunity to speak, that I'm on the same program as Fred Guttenberg, it's a humbling experience because he is such a courageous fighter, and you know, all of us have just the most enormous respect for what he and his family have gone through, and to come out of that kind of tragedy with this dedication to saving the lives of other people is something that is just, it's always breathtaking to me to see Fred. So thank you.
Thank you.
I voted in favor of the bill that we had after Parkland. And I campaigned in favor for a few years for increased security for our schools. The Republicans wouldn't even hear it. I had a program that I introduced for several years running to increase the number of school resource officers. The school resource officer, to my understanding, Fred would know better, school resource officer at Parkland failed. But that doesn't mean that the program is a bad program.
100% agreed.
It's a good program. And for instance, in Dade County, it used to be they had a school resource officer at every high school, at middle school, but they only had one for every 3 elementary schools. That's just not okay. And my proposal was to call for expanding school resource officers by using what are called reserve officers, people that are not full-time police officers, but are licensed and trained and they're current. They just don't work full-time, and they tend to work cheaply. They're older officers who maybe have moved on to new jobs but want to keep certification, or younger people just trying to gain experience right out of the academy. They work for a lot less money, and I had proposed for several years that we have the state pay half the cost of every new school resource officer that was brought on board that was a reserve officer. Would have cost a lot of money, but much less than we planned otherwise. I could never get a hearing on it. Even the day after Parkland, I couldn't get a hearing on it in committee. So I have to say, of all the things I voted on in 6 years in the legislature, voting for that bill with the so-called Guardians program that I think is not going to work, that I think is going to ultimately, if it's implemented, result in loss of life somewhere. was the hardest vote I ever had to cast, because I think that's a tragic mistake, and they almost was a poison pill for the bill. But as much as I believe that that's going to result sooner or later in the loss of life, I just prayed that it would not be something that resulted in the loss of lives that we would count as 17s or 26s or 49s. So we haven't done enough, but at least we did, for once, we did something. And between banning bump stocks and raising the age for buying long rifles and long guns, and especially the red flag law that my colleague Lori Berman pushed so hard, I was glad to, at least for once, see that we did something.
If I could just take a minute. This is Florida. So the reality is we passed gun safety in Florida. That never would have happened before. Passing something like this may never happen again, but it did. And so for those on both sides of the aisle that put their necks out and fought for this bill, I'm thankful. It is Florida. It's not as much as I would have hoped for, but it is Florida. Regarding the SROs, I am a firm supporter of school resource officers. The issue with MSD and what happened to my daughter is the school resource officer did not do his job. Had he, my daughter would be alive today. My daughter was the second to last to be shot. She was on the third floor. She was 1 second away from safety. Had that school resource officer done his job, maybe slowed the process down, potentially could have kept that killer from even getting to the third floor. So the issue isn't, do school resource officers help? They do. They help secure premises. So I'm a firm believer in that. I'm glad they're a part of the conversation. And I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. I know we jumped in really quickly into, the issues of gun violence in this country. And I forgot to ask you, Representative Geller, about your short cameo in the DNC, where you actually shine brightly. We could see you. And I know a lot of people in Florida were cheering you on. So, was it filmed, pre-recorded, or did you see the actual speech live? And were you shown live to everyone across the nation?
Live as it was happening, live from my living room. But I do just want to go back, on the more important note. I ran for the legislature a couple times before I got elected. Yeah, there we were clapping. That's the one. We were watching. The first time I ran for the legislature, I ran on a campaign to ban handguns outright. Handguns only serve one purpose, and that purpose is to kill. There I am clapping. That purpose is to kill other human beings. I don't think we want them. I don't think we need them. I understand that some people, including some of the current members of our Supreme Court, read the Second Amendment differently than I do. But the people who ignore the language about a well-regulated militia, by the way, the people who call themselves militias today are anything but well-regulated. I don't think that was intended. And I would just tell people to look to the example of Australia, which has done something dramatic in a contemporary society about gun violence. It's an issue that I feel very, very strongly about. And, for those who think it's impossible to affect what goes on in this country, because guns are simply too prevalent to regulate, the comedian Chris Rock, in something that I think was more real than it was joke, said there's a simple enough solution. Regulate the bullets, and you'd see a dramatic and sudden increase.
That's Jamie's law. Background checks on ammunition.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, for sure. And, that's why I think these issues are so important. We're almost like connected to these issues in some personal way. Some people that might not think that they are, that they don't care, or, you know, that this isn't an issue to fight about, they don't realize that in some way they are connected, you know, because one day it could be their family member, you know, that is a victim of gun violence. And I think that's why it's so important that we make change immediately. And right now, the most immediate way to make this type of change seems to be to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
You currently have 400 million weapons on the streets.
Mhm.
You have 40,000+ people per year dying right now of gun violence. Not all homicide, over half of that is suicide, but that's still gun violence. And there is no active effort on a national level, you know, in the Senate or with this current president to do a thing about it. And we have a lot of options and things we can do. You know, we can't get rid of gun violence, but we can certainly lower the gun violence death rate, and we need to do that.
You know, let me connect a couple of dots. That we allow these constant mass shootings is insanity. That we allow this to occur again and again. But as Fred says, gun violence is not limited to the mass shootings. There's a slow motion mass shooting of the loss of a life or two or three that's going on constantly in this country. Connect that gun violence to an issue that I happen to be passionate about. I've sponsored for several years in the legislature the repeal of the death penalty. And then come to the only thing that's happening now that, you know, kind of is running neck and neck with gun violence and maybe even overtaking it. And that's the tragedy of this COVID that we're all dealing with, that we see the president denying responsibility for, avoiding action, no plan, nothing but saying, oh, maybe there'll be a miracle. And when you put those things together, this kind of troika of death, I'm an optimistic person. I mean, I'm a Democrat in the state house. You've got to be an optimist to go up there knowing you're going to lose every single vote. But when you look at Trump actually said he would do something about guns, and then just lied, just ignored it. And we continue to have this horrible death penalty in our country, and then every day we're losing people to this virus, and we have to be optimistic that there are better days ahead when we have a compassionate, experienced, and intelligent president that will sit in the White House, that will do something for us to be able to fight back, and that will do something to restore honor and dignity and decency and sanity to our government. And if we could give Joe Biden a Democratic Senate as well as a Democratic House, this country can finally begin to move forward on some of these issues after 4 years of just not just stagnation, but of being in retreat. For sure. And Fred, I want to ask you something, because Representative Geller, he mentioned that Trump promised he would do something about guns after Parkland, and he even made a big show about it, saying, oh wait, I might actually, I don't agree with this. I think we actually are going to ban assault weapons. And obviously that never happened.
And he even called out Republicans for their fear of the NRA.
Yeah.
And then he took his call from the NRA that night, and he has never looked back. Listen, I had my taste of Donald Trump's dishonesty in this issue the day I buried my daughter. Because that morning he put out a tweet blaming her murder on the Russia investigation. He politicized my daughter's murder. And that's what he did that very morning. So from the morning that I buried my daughter, I knew Donald Trump wasn't to be trusted or looked to, and there wasn't hope with him. So I don't count on him to do anything on this issue ever again. I only count on voters to help in this mission to fire him and elect Joe Biden.
Yeah, for sure. And, I just want to ask you about something because a lot of people have been talking about it. I believe he's your friend, I believe, Andrew Pollock. You both believe that something should be done about gun violence. But we see that there are two people who have lost someone, both their daughters, and are on the opposite political spectrum. So do you think there is a reason as to why someone would probably, support Donald Trump and think he's the right choice to address gun violence?
Listen, Andrew and I didn't know each other before February 14th, 2018. And we both lost the same thing on February 14th, 2018. And so we both have this burning hole in our heart and this need to do something about it. I don't know him exceptionally well, but I've gotten to know him because of what happened to our families. Listen, I can only say this is who he was a Trump supporter before that. And I suspect that, because that was kind of his comfort zone, that's where he got absorbed into in looking for solutions. And as I've said to others, we disagree vehemently on the issue of what to do about weapons. But we both agree on wanting to make people safer. Mm-hmm. So if somehow or another, him being over here in the camera, it might look like the left, but I'm using my right arm. Him over here on the right and me over here on the other side. If us doing that and pushing and prodding people in both parties leads to meaningful change that makes kids safer in school, then I hope one day he and I can both give each other a pat on the back.
Yep, for sure. And I think that's actually what we hope to see out of a President Joe Biden. Someone who can work with both sides of the aisle and get things
done.
Without
a doubt.
Yeah. And, Representative Geller, I know that you've been in the halls of, the Florida Congress. You know how politics works, how government works effectively. So I want to know what your opinion is about, Joe Biden's address. A lot of people said it was amazing. And you turn on Fox News, they still said it was amazing. They had nothing to say negative about his speech. Yeah, exactly. And exactly. And essentially it was like this speech was the perfect image of what we want to see as Americans. It was not a Democratic speech or a Republican speech. In my opinion, it was an American speech.
Yeah.
So I want to listen to your opinion, Representative Geller, on, how good was that speech and was it effective in bringing Americans closer together?
Joe Biden is a uniter. It's the single thing about him. He took a lot of grief in our primary for saying things like, we have to work with Republicans. We have to work together. We have to work across the aisle. Now, Joe Biden's a progressive. He always has been. He's always been cutting edge. But the reality that you have to reach some compromise in politics should be evident to people, because the fact is that people on either extreme, and I'm not a centrist, I'm a progressive, but people on either extreme need to understand that when you have an election and when you win, the people you defeat don't disappear off the planet. They don't just suddenly go away. Mm-hmm. They're still there. They're still going to be around. They're still going to be heard from, only now they're in a bad mood. So to me, I've seen a lot of Joe Biden over the years. I've watched him since I saw him for the first time when I was 19 years old, at my first National Young Democrats convention. I saw Joe Biden, and he was a 30-year-old U.S. senator, had been 6 months in office. I've seen him make a lot of great speeches over the years because he speaks from his heart, and he's smart. So I've seen, is it the best speech Joe Biden ever made? I don't know about that. But it was the most important speech that Joe Biden ever made. Accepting our nomination, announcing himself to the American people, and speaking like a president. Speaking with the intelligence and compassion and dignity and foresight that we need in a president. And it was a presidential address, and it showed what a great president he'll be. And I thought it was a wonderful speech. I really did.
You know, for me, it's the best speech he's ever given. And it was a truly American speech. It was an uplifting speech. When I went on social media the next day, what I also said was the reason he was uniquely able to deliver that speech is because that is who he is. Yeah. You know, he wasn't reading something prepared for him that doesn't give you a sense of the man. That is who Joe Biden is. That is who he will be as president. You saw the civility, you saw the compassion, you saw the toughness, you saw the guy who believes in the greatness of this country. And greatest speech for me that I've ever seen, and I hope it catapults him to the presidency.
Yeah, thank you so much to the both of you. I know Representative Geller, you have another event to attend to, so thank you so much. Thank you so much to Mr. Guttenberg who came on. So thank you both for showing your support for Joe Biden.
Good night, everybody.
And we're going to win this together. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right, take care. Well, folks, there you have it. I just want to thank them again, our special guests. They really gave us an insight as to what issues really will affect us if Donald Trump has another 4 years. But we also talked about what solutions we have for those issues if Joe Biden is elected for 4 years and even 8 years maybe. So we'll see. But for those of you that did not see the DNC, we're going to quickly show you the actual speech he gave that Mr. Guttenberg and Representative Geller said was so great. And I have to agree with him. It was really great. So before we show it, I just want to say this. We're 10 weeks away till Election Day. So we don't have a lot of time. And I really urge all of you, you know, as someone who can't vote, but is doing something to try and get involved. And for the others that can't vote, like my fellow high schoolers for Biden that I work with almost every day, you know, a lot of them can't vote. So I'm asking you to vote for them, you know, because we need to really make this change in this country. We have to meet the moment, and we have to elect Joe Biden as president of the United States. So thank you, and we're going to show Joe Biden's speech right now.
Good evening. Ella Baker, a giant of the civil rights movement, left us with this wisdom: give people light, and they will find the way. Give people light. Those are words for our time. The current president has cloaked American darkness for much too long. Too much anger, too much fear, too much division. Here and now, I give you my word. If you entrust me with the presidency, I will draw on the best of us, not the worst. I'll be an ally of the light, not the darkness. It's time for us, for we the people, to come together. And make no mistake, united we can and will overcome this season of darkness in America. We'll choose hope over fear, facts over fiction, fairness over privilege. I'm a proud Democrat, and I'll be proud to carry the banner of our party into the general election. So it's with great honor and humility I accept this nomination for President of the United States of America. But while I'll be a Democratic candidate, I will be an American president. I'll work hard for those who didn't support me, as hard for them as I did for those who did vote for me. That's the job of a president, to represent all of us, not just our base or our party. This is not a partisan moment. This must be an American moment. It's a moment that calls for hope and light and love, hope for our future, light to see our way forward, and love for one another. America isn't just a collection of clashing interests of red states or blue states. We're so much bigger than that. We're so much better than that. You know, nearly a century ago, Franklin Roosevelt pledged a New Deal in a time of massive unemployment, uncertainty, and fear. Stricken by a disease, stricken by a virus, FDR insisted that he would recover and prevail, and he believed America could as well. And he did, and we can as well. This campaign isn't just about winning votes. It's about winning the heart and, yes, the soul of America. Winning it for the generous among us, not the selfish. Winning it for workers who keep this country going, not just the privileged few at the top. Winning it for those communities who have known the injustice of a knee on the neck. For all the young people who have known only America being rising inequity and shrinking opportunity, they deserve the experience of America's promise. They deserve to experience it in full. You know, no generation ever knows what history will ask of it. All we can ever know is whether we're ready when that moment arrives. And now history has delivered us to one of the most difficult moments America's ever faced. Four historic crises, all at the same time. A perfect storm. The worst pandemic in over 100 years. The worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The most compelling call for racial justice since the 60s. And the undeniable realities and just the accelerating threats of climate change. So the question for us is simple. Are we ready? I believe we are. We must be. You know, all elections are important. We know in our bones this one is more consequential. As many have said, America is at an inflection point, a time of real peril, but also of extraordinary possibilities. We can choose a path of becoming angrier, less hopeful, more divided, a path of shadow and suspicion, or we can choose a different path and together take this chance to heal, to reform, to unite, a path of hope and light. This is a life-changing election. This will determine what America is going to look like for a long, long time. Character is on the ballot. Compassion is on the ballot. Decency, science, democracy, they're all on the ballot. Who we are as a nation, what we stand for, and most importantly, who we want to be, that's all on the ballot. And the choice could not be more clear. No rhetoric is needed. Just judge this president on the facts. 5 million Americans infected by COVID-19. More than 170,000 Americans have died. By far the worst performance of any nation on earth. More than 50 million people have filed for unemployment this year. More than 10 million people are going to lose their health insurance this year. Nearly 1 in 6 small businesses have closed this year. And this president, if he's reelected, you know what will happen. Cases and deaths will remain far too high. More mom and pop businesses will close their doors, and this time for good. Working families will struggle to get by. And yet the wealthiest 1% will get tens of billions of dollars in new tax breaks. And the assault on the Affordable Care Act will continue until it's destroyed, taking insurance away from more than 20 million people, including more than 15 million people on Medicaid, and getting rid of the protections that President Obama worked so hard to get passed for people who have 100 million more people who have pre-existing conditions. And speaking of President Obama, a man I was honored to serve alongside for 8 years as vice president, let me take this moment to say something we don't say nearly enough. Thank you, Mr. President. You were a great president, a president our children could and did look up to. No one's going to say that about the current occupant of the White House. What we know about this president is if he's given 4 more years, he'll be what he's been for the last 4 years. A president who takes no responsibility, refuses to lead, blames others, cozies up to dictators, and fans the flames of hate and division. He'll wake up every day believing the job is all about him, never about you. Is that the American you want for you, your family, your children? I see a different America, one that's generous and strong, selfless and humble. It's an America we can rebuild together. As president, the first step I will take will be to get control of the virus that has ruined so many lives. Because I understand something this president hasn't from the beginning. We will never get our economy back on track. We will never get our kids safely back in schools. We'll never have our lives back until we deal with this virus. The tragedy of where we are today is it didn't have to be this bad. Just look around. It's not this bad in Canada or Europe or Japan or almost anywhere else in the world. And the president keeps telling us the virus is going to disappear. He keeps waiting for a miracle. Well, I have news for him. No miracle is coming. We lead the world in confirmed cases. We lead the world in deaths. Our economy is in tatters with Black, Latino, Asian American, Native American communities bearing the brunt of it. And after all this time, the president still does not have a plan. Well, I do. If I'm your president, on day 1, we'll implement the national strategy I've been laying out since March. We'll develop and deploy rapid tests with results available immediately. We'll make the medical supplies and protective equipment that our country needs. We'll make them here in America, so we will never again be at the mercy of China or other foreign countries in order to protect our own people. We'll make sure our schools have the resources they need to be open, safe, and effective. We'll put politics aside. We'll take the muzzle off our experts so the public gets the information they need and deserve. Honest, unvarnished truth. They can handle it. We'll have a national mandate to wear masks, not as a burden, but as a patriotic duty to protect one another. In short, we'll do what we should have done from the very beginning. Our current president has failed in his most basic duty to the nation. He's failed to protect us. He's failed to protect America. And my fellow Americans, that is unforgivable. As president, I'll make you a promise. I'll protect America. I will defend us from every attack, seen and unseen, always, without exception, every time. Look, I understand. I understand how hard it is to have any hope right now. On this summer night, let me take a moment to speak to those of you who have lost the most. I have some idea how it feels to lose someone you love. I know that deep black hole that opens up in the middle of your chest and you feel like you're being sucked into it. I know how mean and cruel and unfair life can be sometimes. But I've learned 2 things. First, your loved one may have left this earth, but they'll never leave your heart. They'll always be with you. You'll always hear them. And second, I found the best way through pain and loss and grief is to find purpose. As God's children, each of us have a purpose in our lives. We have a great purpose as a nation to open the doors of opportunity to all Americans, to save our democracy, to be a light to the world once again, and finally to live up to and make real the words written in the sacred documents that founded this nation, that all men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know, my dad was an honorable, decent man. He got knocked down a few times pretty hard, but he always got back up. He worked hard, and he built a great middle-class life for our family. He used to say, Joey, I don't expect the government to solve my problems, but I sure in hell expect them to understand them. And then he'd say, Joey, a job is about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about your place in the community. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. I've never forgotten those lessons. That's why my economic plan is all about jobs, dignity, respect, and community. Together we can and will rebuild our economy. And when we do, we'll not only build back, we'll build back better. With modern roads, bridges, highways, broadband, ports and airports as a new foundation for economic growth, with pipes that transport clean water to every community, with 5 million new manufacturing and technology jobs, so the future is made in America. With a healthcare system that lowers premiums, deductibles, drug prices, by building on the Affordable Care Act he's trying to rip away. With an education system that trains our people for the best jobs of the 21st century. There's not a single thing American workers can't do. And where cost doesn't prevent young people from going to college and student debt doesn't crush them when they get out. With a child care and elder care system that makes it possible for parents to go to work and for the elderly to stay in their homes with dignity. With an immigration system that powers our economy and reflects our values. And with newly empowered labor unions. They're the ones that built the middle class. With equal pay for women, with rising wages, you can raise a child on, a family on. And yes, we're going to do more than praise our essential workers. We're finally going to pay them. Pay them. We can and we will deal with climate change. It's not only a crisis, it's an enormous opportunity. An opportunity for America to lead the world in clean energy and create millions of new, good-paying jobs in the process. And we can pay for these investments by ending loopholes, unnecessary loopholes, and the president's $1.3 trillion tax giveaway to the wealthiest 1% and the biggest, most profitable corporations, some of which do not pay any tax at all. Because we don't need a tax code that rewards wealth more than it rewards work. I'm not looking to punish anyone. Far from it. But it's long past time the wealthiest people and the biggest corporations in this country paid their fair share. And for our seniors, Social Security is a sacred obligation, a sacred promise made. They paid for. The current president is threatening to break that promise. He's proposing to eliminate a tax that pays for almost half the Social Security without any way of making up for that lost revenue, resulting in cuts. I will not let that happen. If I'm your president, we're going to protect Social Security and Medicare. You have my word. One of the most powerful voices we hear in the country today is from our young people. They're speaking to the inequity and injustice that has grown up in America. Economic injustice, racial injustice, environmental injustice. I hear their voices. If you listen, you can hear them too. And whether it's the existential threat posed by climate change, the daily fear of being gunned down in school, or the inability to get started in your first job, it will be the work of the next president to restore the promise of America to everyone. And I'm not going to have to do it alone, because I'll have a great vice president at my side. Senator Kamala Harris. She's a powerful voice for this nation. Her story is the American story. She knows about all the obstacles thrown in the way of so many in our country. Women, Black Americans, South Asian Americans, immigrants, the left out and the left behind. But she's overcome every obstacle she's ever faced. No one's been tougher on the big banks and the gun lobby. No one's been tougher in calling out the current administration for its extremism, its failure to follow the law, its failure to simply tell the truth. Kamala and I both draw from our families. That's where we get our strength. For Kamala, it's Doug and their families. For me, it's Jill and ours. I've said many times, no man deserves one great love in his life, let alone two. But I've known two. After losing my first wife in that car accident, Jill came into my life. She put our family back together. She's an educator, a mom, a military mom, and an unstoppable force. If she puts her mind to it, just get out of the way. She's going to get it done. She was a great second lady, and I know she'll make a great first lady for this nation. She loves this country so much. And I'll always have the strength that can only come from family. Hunter, Ashley, all our grandchildren, my brothers, my sister, they give me courage. They lift me up. While he's no longer with us, Bo inspires me every day. Bo served our nation in uniform. A year in Iraq, a decorated Iraqi war veteran. So I take very personally the profound responsibility of serving as commander-in-chief. I'll be a president who will stand with our allies and friends and make it clear to our adversaries the days of cozying up to dictators is over. Under President Biden, America will not turn a blind eye to Russian bounties on the heads of American soldiers. Nor will I put up with foreign interference in our most sacred democratic exercise, voting. And I'll always stand for our values of human rights and dignity. I'll work in common purpose for a more secure, peaceful, and prosperous world. History has thrust one more urgent task on us. Will we be the generation that finally wipes out the stain of racism from our national character? I believe we're up to it. I believe we're ready. Just a week ago yesterday was the 3rd anniversary of the events in Charlottesville. Close your eyes. Remember what you saw on television. Remember seeing those neo-Nazis and Klansmen and white supremacists coming out of fields with lighted torches, veins bulging, spewing the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. Remember the violent clash that ensued between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And remember what the president said when asked? He said there were, quote, very fine people on both sides. It was a wake-up call for us as a country, and for me, a call to action. At that moment, I knew I'd have to run, because my father taught us that silence was complicity, and I could never remain silent or complicit. At the time, I said we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. And we are. You know, one of the most important conversations I've had this entire campaign, it was with someone who was much too young to vote. I met with 6-year-old Gianna Floyd the day before her daddy, George Floyd, was laid to rest. She's an incredibly brave little girl. And I'll never forget it. When I leaned down to speak to her, she looked in my eyes and she said, and I quote, "Daddy changed the world. Daddy changed the world." Her words burrowed deep into my heart. Maybe George Floyd's murder was a breaking point. Maybe John Lewis's passing the inspiration. But however it's come to be, however it's happened, America's ready, in John's words, to lay down, quote, the heavy burden of hate at last, and to end the hard work of rooting out our systemic racism. You know, American history tells us that it's been in our darkest moments that we've made our greatest progress, that we found the light. In this dark moment, I believe we're poised to make great progress again, that we can find the light once more. You know, many people have heard me say this, but I've always believed you can define America in one word: possibilities. The defining feature of America: everything is possible. That in America, everyone, and I mean everyone, should be given an opportunity to go as far as their dreams and God-given ability will take them. We can never lose that. In times as challenging as these, I believe there's only one way forward. As a united America, united in our pursuit of a more perfect union, united in our dreams of a better future for us and for our children, united in our determination to make the coming years bright. Are you ready? I believe we are. This is a great nation. We're a good and decent people. For Lord's sake, this is the United States of America. And there's never been anything we've been able to accomplish when we've done it together. The Irish poet Seamus Heaney once wrote, "History says, don't hope on this side of the grave, but then, once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up and hope and history rhyme." This is our moment to make hope and history rhyme. With passion and purpose, let us begin, you and I together, one nation, under God, united in our love for America, united in our love for each other. For love is more powerful than hate. Hope is more powerful than fear. And light is more powerful than dark. This is our moment. This is our mission. May history be able to say that the end of this chapter of American darkness began here tonight, as love and hope and light join in the battle for the soul of the nation. And this is a battle we will win, and we'll do it together. I promise you. Thank you, and may God bless you, and may God protect our troops.